All right, gang, grab your coffee and let's sit down and talk food for a little bit. Well, good morning, everyone. My name's Woody Kingman, and I am honored to represent the Office of Institutional Advancement and the Alumni Board, which puts together these events known as Breakfast at Blake. Thank you all for making it today. We've got a great crowd, and we even have a pile of name tags out there of folks that decided not to brave the roads this morning. But it's a record February crowd, which I think speaks a lot to our speaker this morning, so I'm sure we're all looking forward to hearing from Carla. Before we do hear from her, though, let me just tell you about our upcoming events. We'll break for March for spring break, and then in April, the class of 1955 speaker, Kalia Yang, will be here. She is a Hmong American author, filmmaker, and teacher, and a co-founder of Words Wanted, which is a company dedicated to helping immigrants with writing, translating, and other business services. And then in May, we'll hear from Dr. Valerie Golden, class of 1972. Valerie is the president of the American Psychoanalytic Association Candidates Council and a highly sought-after therapist with more than 25 years' experience specializing in the treatment of attorneys, professional and executives, which means I think that most of us probably need her help. So hopefully we can get some from her in May. Well, today we have the pleasure of hearing from Carla Vernón. Carla is the president of the General Mills Natural and Organic Operating Unit and leads the financial and environmental stewardship strategy for the company's $1 billion portfolio of natural and organic food brands, including Annie's, Cascadian Farms, Muir Glen, Epic, and Immaculate Baking. Under Carla's leadership, General Mills has become the second largest producer of branded organic foods in the U.S. Early in her career at General Mills, Carla was the brand manager of Cherrios, of Honey Nut Cheerios, and that's a position that's been held by a number of Blake graduates, including a guy named Kingman from the class of 1939. Outside of General Mills, Carla has served on the National Board of Directors for the Make-A-Wish Foundation and the Advisory Board for the Wisconsin School of Business's Center of Brand and Product Management. And most importantly, Carla is the mother of 5th grader Charlie and 7th grader Jay, who are with us today as well. So here for her presentation, Food Matters, Looking for Our Grocery Cart to Hopeful Solutions for Climate Change, is Carla Vernón.
Thank you for welcoming me this morning. Oh, shorter. And thank you for welcoming my family into the Blake community. My husband and I are both products of public school, but now, more importantly, we're proud parents of 2 brilliant Blake Bears. As Woody has said, our daughter Charlie, who's in 5th grade, and our son Jay, who's in 7th grade. Thank you for everyone who's come out. I know the roads are snowy. It's a Minnesota February, and I appreciate you taking this time on a snowy day to come hear a bit of my journey, as well as how that incorporates with my passion for what we're doing at General Mills for natural and organic foods and sustainability. February in Minnesota is certainly always a challenge, but February has a specific significance for me for another reason, and I'd like to speak to that reason. You see, my children and I are Afro-Latino, and for those of you who are not familiar with that term, that means we have African American and Latin American heritage. My parents are both Black, and my father was an immigrant to this country from Central America. And in the US, Black History Month is February, and it's that time that we reflect on our history, our heritage, and how it influences our circumstances today. So as I'm in my February time of reflection, my remarks today will be influenced by the story of resilience, self-confidence, and persistence that has been required to be an Afro-Latina trying to make a big impact in corporate America. Resilience, self-confidence, and persistence. 3 cornerstone qualities of my journey. The Fortune 500 is a list of the 500 largest public companies in the United States by revenue. Today, on the list, there are only 3 Black CEOs, 3 out of 500. That's 0.6%. And all 3 of those CEOs are men. You have to go all the way down to the Fortune 1000 to find an African American female CEO. So when we make it to significant levels of stature and impact in corporate America, it's the result of persistence and resilience. Today, I have the incredible job of being a corporate officer and leading the natural and organic portfolio at General Mills. This role also gives me the opportunity to usher a company that was founded in 1866 into the forefront of what's going on in food, agriculture, and sustainability today. The whole career journey feels like a dream. When I hear Woody read my biography, and thank you for that, Woody, it's almost magical how it takes a 25-year career journey and spins it into about a golden yarn of 7 sentences. As I said earlier, it was by no means a foregone conclusion that someone like me would be able to climb the ladder to the higher ranks of the top of a leading corporation in America. You see, my parents came of age in the era of segregation in America. My father came to this country in his early 20s from Panama. This is a picture of my father, the littlest one in the white shorts, cute, and his 2 older brothers. He came from Panama, a country that was not segregated. When he was in Panama, he had all the rights and privileges of any citizen in that country. Admittedly, he and his family were very poor, living in a city of Colón, Panama, a port city that was full of ethnic and cultural diversity to support the commerce and construction related to the building of the Panama Canal. My father, Carlos, a world-class track athlete, forewent the opportunity to compete in the Olympic Games representing his country in order to instead come to the United States in the 1950s to become the first person in his family to go to college. I love this photo of him in New York City. The first place he and his brothers arrived, posing like such a menswear model in February 1960. You see he's wearing gloves in the picture. It's February in this picture, and he's writing a letter to his mom, and you can see his writing actually on the back. It's really quite special. It says, "If you look on the steps, you will see the white left, you will see what's left of the snow. The photo was taken after the snowing stopped." I mean, can you imagine this little dusting of snow, folks? But clearly it was a very new and different experience from his warm homeland near the equator. After he arrived in New York City with his 2 older brothers, he soon left to head for college in Louisiana while they remained in New York to work. He arrived at Xavier University in New Orleans, the only historically Black Catholic college, where he met my mom. He didn't have much more than his steamer trunk with him. I remember he would tell us stories of how the nuns had sympathy for him as a new immigrant to this country and gave him evening jobs in the chemistry lab to earn some spending money. This was the 1950s and 60s. It was still the land of Jim Crow racial segregation law in America. And I often try to imagine what it would be like to move from a country where you were already 18 or 20 years old and accustomed to being a fully free person, and then to move to a new country far away from family, where you were no longer legally free to go the same places that people of a different race could go. He couldn't use the same water fountain, bathroom, or swimming pool. He couldn't shop in the same department stores, choose where to sit in a restaurant, or select any seat on a bus or a train. You name it. By all the laws of government, he was not allowed. Sometimes I try to put it in modern terms for myself. I imagine the opening weekend of the next Lego movie, starring the voices of our favorite voice actors, or maybe the next Avengers movie, starring Robert Downey Jr. and any of the Chris's, Pratt, Evans, Pine, Hemsworth. My kids have seen the commercials for the movie on TV and they want to see it. Except when we go to the theater, we can't walk in the front door and buy a soda and popcorn like everyone else. Instead, I have to take them up a side door, up a narrow and musty staircase, to an area where the seats are old and a bit worn, and the view is a bit obscured due to the angle. Or we're out running our Saturday errands, and my kids have to go to the bathroom, and I have to tell them we cannot use the bathroom they see nearby because they are black. We have to walk much farther, maybe blocks and blocks, finding a bathroom that is for us. Can you imagine the resilience required to parent under those conditions? Resilience and persistence. My mom, sitting in the front row, give a wave, Mom. My mom is also from a culturally rich port city. This is a picture of my mom, Cynthia, the little one in the white, and her sister, Bobby, and their mother, Mamie Dell, my grandmother. They look as sweet as can be, but these pictures are from a time when black children in America lived their entire childhood under these segregated restrictions. One afternoon last year, I had the opportunity to ask my mom to tell me about that experience, and I've recorded it, and those tapes, that firsthand account, will stop you in your tracks. I remember her telling me of a story about going to an amusement park in the summer, driving in the humid New Orleans sun in the era before air-conditioned buses. It was sweltering outside, and inside of the bus are maybe 24 excited elementary and middle school kids on their way to the amusement park. But not the big, colorful park that you first pass, the one with the exciting rides and activities and the brightest lollipops and the juiciest candy apples. Instead, they have to drive to a park much farther down the highway, a different park on those hot and humid summer afternoons, to one where the rides are not as new, not as colorful, and not as exciting. All this because as a little girl, the same age as our Blake children, she was told that she did not deserve to play in those special places because her skin is not the right color. Can you imagine the self-confidence it would take to grow up and still feel like you are a wonderful, equally valuable human being? Resilience, self-confidence, persistence. Well, when I tell you those stories, I don't want you to imagine downtrodden and pitiable characters. I want you to imagine beautiful, cheerful, immaculately groomed, intelligent children, and smartly dressed, ambitious, and academically inclined adults. Because my parents are brilliant and resilient. Not only did my parents earn undergraduate degrees and master's degrees in science and math, but when they were raising my brother and me, both of them earned their PhDs. My now deceased father earned his PhD in mathematics education, and my radiant mother earned hers in microbiology. I don't care what race or culture you are, frankly, you need to be extremely persistent and resilient to have PhDs in microbiology and math. But now you can see how I was already given a foundation of resilience, self-confidence, and persistence before I was even born. I wish I could say those issues and challenges were buried at the close of the civil rights movement, but the journey to my dream job still required all three. You see, I grew up in an idyllic suburb on the East Coast. It was sort of the equivalent of Edina, if Buffalo, New York can have an equivalent of Edina. A place called Amherst, New York, and just like my husband Jason's parents, my parents chose that community, this particular suburb, to get us access to the best public school system in the region. From my perspective, it was an absolutely normal suburban childhood, but my first encounter with the barriers and hurdles of systemic bias happened when it came time to apply to colleges. My high school guidance counselor, Mr. Craig, gosh, I'll never forget him, a curly tumble of dark hair and glasses. Mr. Craig and I reviewed a list of the colleges I was interested in applying to. I had identified a group of safety schools, schools that should be fairly easy for me to get into, and a smaller list of reach schools. They were more of a gamble. And on this list were a couple of Ivy League schools, including two of my favorites, Yale and Princeton. Well, my guidance counselor suggested that since my family didn't have much money, I shouldn't waste my parents' hard-earned $35 on the application fee required to apply to those schools. I left that meeting crushed. You see, when you're young, it is so important to have adults in your life who believe in you and encourage you. To be honest, no matter what your age, Charlie and Jay, at your ages, at my age, or at my mother's age, it's important to have people who are assuming the very best and greatest things are possible for you, and the very best and greatest things are possible from you. But thankfully, my parents had given me the DNA and the preparation to circumvent and overcome the doubts of others, the resilience and self-confidence I would need to apply for the application fee waivers and send those Ivy League applications in. And off to Princeton I went to pursue a degree in ecology and evolutionary biology. Yes, another scientist for our family. I was already sparked with my own budding interest in the planet and the environment as a child. You see, I would spend the 1970s and 1980s, my after-school hours, I would just spend hours digging around in the front yard of my mother's front lawn, making the perfect mud pies. And as I was growing up and coming of, I can't imagine what that did to her front lawn. Somehow she went with it. She was a grad student. She did not care as long as I was busy. It was a time of growing earth consciousness in the United States. There were slogans and national campaigns to stop pollution and encourage recycling. We were all being asked to give a hoot, don't pollute, to keep America beautiful, and then later to recycle, reuse, and reduce, save the rainforest, and so much more. As a young kid, I was already beginning to worry about how we were damaging the planet for the kids that I knew I would have someday. And so, as a college grad with an ecology degree on my hands, I looked for a way to do something about it. My first stop was a job at the Nature Conservancy in Chicago, helping to protect natural landscapes in urban environments. But I was always losing the battle as we were trying to protect green spaces from turning into workspaces. Workspaces always won. But it was in Chicago under the mentorship and of a cadre of very well-placed Princeton alumni mentors that I learned that there are other ways to do big acts of good in the world. I could make a difference beyond the nonprofit sector if only I could find a big company that shared my value system, a place that had big resources that I could use to do big good. My career at General Mills began 20 years ago, at the same time that General Mills began reimagining itself as a leader in the natural and organic food movement. I arrived in 1998, the same year we acquired Cascadian Farm, the first organic food company in our portfolio and one of the first organic brands nationally available in the United States. And now, 20 years in, instead of imaginary food I would create out of dirt and mud in my parents' front yard, I get to lead an amazing group of natural and organic brands like Annie's and Cascadian Farm, Muir Glen, and Epic. And these brands and our larger company have the opportunity to impact people's personal wellness and the wellness of our planet and the climate. You see, often when we think about the drivers of climate change, the focus becomes on sectors traditionally associated with emissions, such as transportation or manufacturing, or areas typically associated with waste, such as plastics. But the food system is a large driver of global greenhouse gas emissions. You see, research shows that 1/3 of all greenhouse gas emissions come from the food system, and 80% of those come from agriculture. So, if food is a big part of the problem, then large food companies must step up and be part of the solution. When big food companies help drive environmentally friendly practices in agriculture, we can impact massive amounts of land for the better. And in many cases, the solutions to climate change are right under our feet. As we manage the soil to keep carbon and water down deep into the roots of the soil, we pull carbon and heat out of the air. As we build more pollinator habitat, we create thriving ecosystems and better plants. that send their root systems down into the ground, and those roots act as a web protecting the soil and really retaining and feeding healthy soil and macro and micro ecosystems. As we do this practice, which is now known as regenerative agriculture, we add stability back to our land, our water, and our air. So at General Mills, we've made a bold pledge. We've pledged, and we followed that pledge with clear actions. We made a pledge to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions by 28% across our value chain by the year 2025. That's the equivalent to taking 1 million cars off the road. We've already had very good progress against our goals. We've already measured that we've reduced greenhouse gases by 11%, which actually outstrips the amount of growth we've had in that same time, which means we've been able to actually bend the curve in our actions and compensate not only for the growth in the land we use, but do more good above and beyond that. Last spring, we also announced a commitment to create the largest single contiguous row crop organic farm in the United States. 34,000 acres of organic farm. The ingredients grown on that farm will be used in Annie's mac and cheese products for years to come. So when you buy Annie's mac and cheese, you are helping the planet. So food matters a lot, and we need leaders who care at the top of corporations, and in my case, food companies. And many of our best ideas are coming from these small and rebellious companies like Annie's and Epic and Cascadian Farm. But the art of putting the small together with the big is as important as is an important part of staying on track to deliver our mission and our goals. But it's the process of putting those companies together that's a bit like putting two families together that have different cultures, different worldviews, and different understandings and expectations of success. It's a transition that calls for lots of persistence. And in this case, the replacing of beloved founders of a small company also takes a healthy amount of resilience and self-confidence. The culture inside of two companies can be difficult to blend. The small company may mistrust the larger parent company. Will they crush our soul? Will they make us abandon our radical agenda? The larger company may misunderstand the smaller partner. Why do they want to do all these crazy ideas that make no money? Will they make us abandon our radical agenda? The larger company may misunderstand the smaller partner. Why do they want to do all these crazy ideas that make no money? Why do they want to go on record with these unimaginable goals? Sometimes the original founder sees this as the moment to leave the company and head to a new adventure. But many of the existing employees and industry fans aren't ready to let them go. Do any Apple fans in the room remember when it was inevitable that it was time for us all to say goodbye to the iconic Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple, and welcome some unknown guy named Tim Cook? Even those of us that don't work at Apple found ourselves skeptical and questioning, who is this new guy? Is he going to ruin things? Will he be inspiring? Will he be cool? Will he get it? This is the same journey I've had to take my teams on as their icons depart these small companies. And the teams have had to get to know some unknown guy named Carla Vernón. But luckily, I could draw on those early lessons of resilience and persistence, and I could help people inside the organizations get through their feelings of loss. With people outside of the company, it's a bit more difficult. Much like Mr. Craig, my guidance counselor, I've encountered a lot of people who don't believe I'm capable of operating at the level of those iconic founders. Sometimes when I speak at industry events, even though I'm a 20-year veteran food executive, industry people will say the exact same 7 words to me. Well, you've got big shoes to fill. At first, I would feel crushed, just like I did back in high school. And then, after a while, the resilience playbook kicked in, and I found 7 words of my own. When "wow, you have big shoes to fill" would get said to me, I would say, "That's okay, I brought my own shoes." So, on the journey to a dream job of significance and impact, the road isn't straight and it's not as smooth as it sounds in a 7-sentence biography. And in my case, the foundation was being developed long before I was even born. And my hope is that in my own family and the extended Blake family, we will continue to give our children the foundation of resilience, self-confidence, and persistence that they will draw upon in their own journey to impact. Thank you.
Thanks. I have a question about reducing carbon as you're addressing climate change. So I'm sure you know that there are all of these papers, models on how it doesn't take any one thing, that it's often a series of different changes that lead to change. So you talk about how you reduced, your company reduced emissions by like 28% or something. Are there any major changes that led to that, or is it a combination of a whole bunch of different things that additively?
Wonderful, thank you for asking. So on the course of delivering on our pledge to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 28% by the year 2025. We've so far made 11% of that progress. One of the things I said was it is across our value chain. So if you go to the General Mills website, I just say this because there's a lot of really wonderful information and more specifics. If you go to the General Mills website or the General Mills Foundation website, you can find our CSR white paper, our summary of our actions and the underpinnings of all the components in more detail and more specifics. But what I would say is we do realize that we need the partnership that goes, what we say, all the way from field to fork. So it is working with our partner farmers, because actually General Mills does not own most of the agricultural land that we're trying to influence. So we need to really work with farmers and engage the companies that do the agriculture. What are the practices that we all need to change together, as well as looking at how do we reduce the number of trucks on the road, how do we work with partners at the grocery store companies to help support their efforts to drive sustainability. In some instances, we can provide them some of the education from our supply chain teams to help improve their own supply chain efforts across the goal. And then finally, there are the people who use our end products, trying to make our products more easily recyclable, trying to reduce the amount of waste and plastics and fiber products in our materials, and also increasing the interest and demand in products that are organic or are grown in ways that use these new regenerative practices. So the ways in which we drive consumer awareness in order to increase consumers' interest in buying products of this sort so that the whole cycle can be robust. Some of those are the ways that we've been doing it, but as you said, it requires, I love that Arthur Ashe quote, right? Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. And so it requires us to do what we can as a food company, but other partner companies are going to certainly play in different ways.
I'm just wondering whether General Mills is working with grocery stores to get healthy food into communities that currently don't have grocery stores in our major cities.
Absolutely. So General Mills is actually one of the companies that helped to found Second Harvest. And so we have had a long relationship with grocery partners and food service partners to make sure that food that is still very well in its lifespan for human consumption and is very nutritious, but maybe isn't going to effectively get all the way from a grocery shelf into somebody's cart. We have a lot of ways in which we make sure that that food gets to other places like the food shelves and like community centers where people can eat it. I'm really proud of an innovation our foundation has been funding recently, and I won't remember the exact name, but we're founding something, and it's almost known as the Uber for food, and it is a technology that lets us work with places like airports, hospitals, restaurants, food service cafeterias to find that fresh food that's close to the point of aging. You know when you go to the airport and you look at that tuna sandwich and it's like the date is tomorrow on there and you're like, I'm gonna dig through and find a little longer of a date. But that tuna sandwich is The date is a sell-by date for tomorrow. It's not an eat-by date for tomorrow. But because that really tends to discourage people from buying it, we know that there's a way to get that wonderful, high-quality food to people. So now there's actually an app that we have connected across that entire web that connects people with, I've got this much food available by the end of the day at the MSP airport. We're going to collect it. And then there's an organization that knows to come pick it up and make sure that that then gets redistributed at all of the local wonderful organizations that are making sure that that food can get into communities. I am so proud also of how Blake encourages that kind of community participation. My son is gone. I can embarrass him now. He's part of the service club. I'm so proud of him because he's been volunteering at 3 of the wonderful local organizations, Feed My Starving Children, which has a strong General Mills partnership. We help develop the formulas of those mixes that we all love, scooping the rice and scooping the soy, as well as Loaves and Fishes and Second Harvest. So I just love this community is one that serves from the heart, you know.
Hi, thanks for your presentation.
Thank you.
So I have a question about the non-organic side of food production and product. What opportunities do you see for regenerative agriculture or carbon sequestration through those types of products?
Oh, I am so glad you brought that up. Now we're getting really geeky for agriculture here, folks. So the thing that I want to just explain is that my wonderful community, the food sector, we are truly just like a family, which means we don't always see everything the same way. And sometimes there are cultures, or maybe dare I say factions within the food sector and food space about what is the best way to steward climate. And so there is a brewing dynamism in food where some people believe that all of these agricultural practices we're talking about are best done if they're done through organic agriculture. And for those of you that don't know, just to give a quick 101 on organic agriculture, it requires very specific certifications and practices to make sure that the land that you are claiming is organic is legally approved to be organic. It's cumbersome, and it's one of the reasons why only 1% of croplands today are organic. So if we only apply these great practices of pulling carbon into the soil and building habitats, if we only do that on 1% of the land, we will not make that progress towards the 28% goal. So we are trying to encourage, as one of the largest food companies and even one of the largest natural and organic food companies, that we use on the conventional side, like our favorite brands like Cherrios and Nature Valley that aren't organic, that they also start converting to some of these new, more stewardship-based practices, because they can still pull water and carbon into the soil, and that would help. So we're trying to really create that knowledge and make this more of a common ground conversation versus a divided ground conversation. I see a fellow Cheerios alum in the back has a question. Cheerios to Cheerios, we must always recognize.
So you've spoken so eloquently about how you've had an impact on the planet and how your background has enabled you to drive that change within a really significant, large company. But as someone who's known you for a long time, I think some of the greatest impact you've had has also been on a more micro level within an organization in the way that you lead and inspire, which I know is a very important word to you. So I was hoping you could share with folks who haven't known you as long some of how you've done that.
Wow, thank you. Well, as I already started this story, I mean, I'm so inspired. I tell everybody, but I might not tell my mom often enough, that my mom is my hero. And she always had the very, very biggest heart. And in our home, even though she was busy and she was a grad student, I always remember at Thanksgiving, at our Thanksgiving table, some people I didn't even know, grad students who kind of didn't have family around for the holidays, would always be welcomed to our Thanksgiving table. And I just remember my parents creating a real spirit that, despite all of this stuff that we talked about that they lived through, that we were going to do things differently. We were going to really create community and encouragement for ourselves and encouragement for others. And so I was really raised in that mindset. Now, mind you, it wasn't always soft and easy. There was a lot of tough love in there. But I did some purpose work, some individual purpose work, actually through General Mills when I was on, when Meredith and I were both working in the cereal operating unit. And one of the things I came to realize realized was it was important to define what is my purpose for being on this planet. If I know my calling and my vocation, I can do it more powerfully. And through that, I realized that my purpose on this planet is to inspire others. And so, as Meredith said, I'm very active in social media, and I have a handle on social media and a brand, and it's called Carla Inspired. So if you are on the tweeters and you're on the Instas, you will find me there as Carla Inspired. And I try to make it my mission, even though I don't always have the nicest thoughts passing through my head in real life. I try to make it my mission that what content I put out in the world should uplift and encourage others to really be their personal best. And I try to do that in my job and at work, and hopefully in my own circle of life. Thank you.
Carla, one of the real challenges in leadership is changing culture. And you were talking about putting new leadership in smaller companies. Do you have a recipe for that? And does it involve these three a little bit?
I'll tell you, I'm learning on the fly, building the ship while we are at sea. First of all, you need to have a great cheering section. That's the first thing, right? We all need a great cheering section, but during times of transition, I'm sure both my teams that have been the ones going through and feeling the transition affect them incredibly deeply and profoundly. I'm sure they need a cheering section. I can tell you for sure I needed a cheering section, and lots of my cheering section is in the room, so thank you for that. But one of the things I learned that I think is very applicable to others as I now coach people a little bit on going through transition is that I believe it's quite similar to, frankly, the stages of grief when you take an organization through significant change and transition. And so I don't think I realized that the first time I was going through the experience, but as I reflect on it now, I realize that what I was trying to lead people through was something, and I don't know if the latest versions of psychology still believe in the DABDA model: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. I don't know if that still is the exact journey, but I realized as I was trying to lead people to get used to some guy called Carla, that they were going through their own form of mourning, and that if you know anything about grief, no one can actually help you move through it at a pace that you're not moving through it at. And so everyone wasn't going through it at the same pace. Once I could recognize, you are in anger right now. You are in denial, but he's not coming back. You got me. It helped me be more patient and resilient as a leader.
Hi, I'm curious, with Amazon and Whole Foods, it seems like there could be big changes coming to supermarkets and advertising, and I'm curious if you have any thoughts on General Mills or your role and how that might look in the future.
Absolutely. I just actually came from a really fantastic meeting at the Whole Foods headquarters in Austin about 8 weeks ago. I love me some Whole Foods. How about it? Anybody using their Amazon Prime discount now to bring those prices down? I think listen, you can't fight Mother Nature, and you can't fight consumers. The people want what the people want. And so it is great news from my perspective for our industry that there continues to be exciting innovation. It is exciting for retailers like Amazon, like Target, like Kroger, like Costco to each be raising their game together as we try to continue to push for better food, better stores, and consumers are more able to ask for what they want and what they need. For companies like General Mills, what's awesome is that we recognized the change to a digitally driven landscape. I mean, easily, again, I've got my friend from former General Mills IT, Jonathan, here. Jonathan was one of the early leaders in helping us recognize and build systems that would get us ready 15 years ago. I'm throwing an estimate out. And so we were one of Amazon's first partners way before anyone was getting it, partially because we learned our lesson because we weren't one of Costco's first customers, and we spent years trying to get caught up. I love the cross-pollination. There's really cool concept stores that Amazon and Whole Foods are testing and piloting all around the country. And it's just, for me, it's another source of innovation. And if it drives more mainstream access to the kind of foods we want people to be eating, I'm all for it. So I feel excited. Bring it on. I'm trying to stay, you know, my kids are always mentoring me in the technology, and then we're mentoring grandma, and so we're all trying to stay with it, man.
Hey, that's terrific. Thanks very much. Thank you so much. That was really, really great. I got something to keep you warm. So, Carla, we have a little something to keep you warm in these cold February days, and we've got some more snow coming, so everyone drive carefully over the next couple of days. Come back in April and come back in May. We'll find out from Valerie whether or not DABDA is still the route we all go through with grief. Thanks everyone for coming. Be safe, be well.
I keep looking at Bearware for a blanket. This is awesome.